the filmmaker wants you to think a certain way about the issue. I want to talk about the movie A Man Called Otto. Now, it's a pretty good movie and with an even better overall message, but that's not why I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it because it's a great and easily seen example of how larger philosophies are transferred down into our thinking. It'll help us sharpen our discernment. In another one of our videos, I made the case that formal philosophy is the most irrelevant and relevant topic in life. The reason I say that is philosophy is a very technical field at the top of the academy, and that most people don't care about it. But the subject matter it deals with are the things we all care about, like what's the meaning of life? What's the nature of what it means to be human? How do we reach conclusions about morals and ethics? How do we know the things we know? Now, philosophers give and then they debate answers to these questions, and those answers that they come up with slowly make their way down from the high academy through other academic disciplines like law or psychology or sociology. But the most effective way those thoughts make their way down into our minds is through the arts. Now, it starts usually with high art, but eventually into popular art, especially music and movies. Movies shape us in ways that you may not see because they arguably have the most effective persuasion tool available. That tool is story. Human beings are wired for story. Everyone loves a good story. Now, we have this remarkable ability to project ourselves emotionally onto characters and vicariously experience what they experience. That's why we love movies and binge-worthy series or TV shows. All stories in one form or the other reflect the worldview or the philosophy of the storyteller. Now, when you enter into the story, you're also entering into the conceptual realm of the one who's telling the story. They give us characters we're supposed to like and sympathize with, or not like and not sympathize with. We're supposed to feel what they feel and end up thinking what they think. The best movies do this in subtle ways. The other movies do it so obviously that they're annoying, and most of us don't like those shows. A Man Called Otto does it semi-obviously, so it's good training on how to see it when it's happening. Maybe you know this and you're attuned to it, but there was a time in my life when I wasn't in tune with it, and there came this pivot point when I did become aware of what they were doing, and it was very helpful in helping me not just drink in ideas without thinking it through. Now, I don't like being manipulated. I'm sure you don't either. I learned that filmmakers didn't always simply just want to entertain me. Some do, but most wanted me to think a certain way about certain subjects. Now, this isn't always a bad thing. Some messages are good. I've seen countless movies that seem to say, put a lot more stock in your family or spend more time with your kids. And as I said, The Man Called Otto in the overall was saying move forward with life, even in the face of grief, contribute, relate, love those around you. That's where life really happens. It's a good traditional feel-good film in that sense. But there was a subplot I found fascinating and worthy of examining. I need to give a spoiler alert because to get into the subplot, I may have to give away too much. So if you've not seen it, you can't say you weren't warned, okay? So A Man Called Otto is based on a Swedish novel called A Man Called Ove, which was also turned to a Swedish movie. So this is the second adaptation of the book. The book was probably pretty good then. First, it's about a grumpy old man in the American version, and that's played by Tom Hanks. Now, the grumpy old man thing provides easy fodder for humor. That's why it's been done many, many times. Now, one of the problems with the film I had was Tom Hanks is known so much as Mr. All-American Nice Guy, it's a little hard to accept him as a grumpy old man, but he's still great to watch in the movies. The camera loves Tom Hanks, let's just say it. Now, early on in the show, Otto gets neighbors who are pretty much his opposite. They're super nice, they're giving people. It's a man with his young pregnant wife and their two little girls. Now, you can tell from the time you meet them that they're the ones that are going to thaw Otto's cold heart. Then comes a scene I notice something a little odd, but it piques my interest. Watch this.
Smack. These dolls, are they some kind of superheroes?
Luchador wrestlers.
So, little girls playing with action figures, wrestlers. But notice how kind of rough they were playing. Now, I know that may not be anything, but I've learned something. Now, when it comes to high-dollar films on this production level, nothing makes it inside the frame of any show that the director doesn't want there. Every detail, every light, every shadow is looked over. Nothing's wasted. Everything's intentional. So I know those girls playing with the wrestlers is a small detail that's likely a statement of some kind because of our stereotypes. Girls that age typically don't play like that. It's mildly unusual and it gets my notice, but I go on. Okay, so fair enough. Now on goes the movie. you learn that Otto is not only grumpy, but he's suicidal. And as the movie goes on, you discover it's because he's lost his wife recently. Your sympathies naturally are inspired for him at that point, and so his grumpiness seems excusable. Now, you're shown a series of flashbacks to the birth of his relationship with his wife, and you learn that they're very different. He's an engineer by trade and temperament, and very exacting, logical, things are supposed to work this way, follow the rules type of person. His wife is the opposite. She's obviously free-spirited, spontaneous, and naturally more loving and accepting of people. Now, she was one who tamed Otto and tendered him up a little. But when she dies, his grief over her death and his natural exacting ways take over again. Then, halfway through the movie, we're introduced to another character. Watch this.
Mrs. Anderson was my teacher. She was the first person that didn't treat me like a freak because I'm transgender.
What's your name?
Malcolm.
Malcolm. Otto.
Nice to meet you, Otto.
Now that's obviously designed to be a powerful emotional moment and a tender one. And more importantly, you have already been set up to have the most sympathy for Otto's now deceased wife, right? The writer wants you to like her, love her, and unconsciously want to be like her. So when we get a story about her, it's easy to see what's going on. This is how you're supposed to think about the trans issue. Notice that there's no argument made. There's just a story told from a character who has just won your respect by working 3 jobs, your sympathy for riding in the snow and not having it easy, who tells a story about another character that says this is how you're supposed to handle this issue. Now, it's not a logical argument. It's an emotional one. Whatever you may think about the trans issue is not really the main point. The point is the filmmaker wants you to think a certain way about the issue, and he's using a very powerful tool to do it. According to how the story is set up and framed so far, loving, kind, admirable people that we all want to be like are like Mrs. Anderson, the kind of people who are the first to call someone by their trans name and to get everybody else to do it as well. Now, maybe without even noticing, while your heart and emotions are tender and tuned into the story, you're given a message that might not be where you are when you started the movie and maybe not even when you leave. But you have been given a little mental and emotional nudge in the direction sympathizing with the larger cultural trans narrative. That's how philosophy makes its way into culture. Now, later in the movie, we're given a harder hit in the same direction. Watch this.
I was hoping you might let me crash on your couch for the night.
This is not a hotel.
No. I'm sorry.
Why can't you go home?
My dad kicked me out. He's embarrassed because I'm trans.
And he's an idiot.
Now, this one is very obvious. Those who do have a problem with the narrative are, according to Otto, the filmmakers, and Tom Hanks, they're idiots. The trusted and beloved Tom Hanks has just called everyone who doesn't think this way an idiot. Now, since very few of us want to be called an idiot by Tom Hanks, we subtly on the inside soften any opposition we might have had or questions that we had about the whole thing. And there you have it. This entire storyline comes from the formal philosophy called queer theory. Now, what's especially fascinating to me is if you had run those same scenes, even as nearby as 10 years ago, it would have come off as really odd because it hadn't been talked about much until just the last few years. But this and countless other subtle messages that you've received in TV shows and movies and communicating in our culture many, many times over make it where this is kind of the normal way to think, so you really don't notice it that much. Now, we now see the world through the eyes of queer theory and queer theorists without even having read one of their books or attended one of their lectures. Now, we absorb all of this through stories. We absorb it through stories that are making even a different point. Remember, this is a subplot. But because the overall plot is something that grabs us and we instinctively agree with it, it's easier to move it into our thinking. I'd be willing to bet if the entire movie was all about the trans issue, most people wouldn't care too much for it. It'd be too preachy and obvious at that point. Again, the Bible says, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. So you're supposed to be active. You're supposed to keep your eyes open. The next time you're watching a movie, try to see clearly what the director and writers are trying to make you think. And you can find this by asking yourself questions like, which character am I supposed to sympathize with? What ideas does that person have that I'm obviously supposed to have, according to the director? Which character am I supposed to not like? What ideas and outlooks does that person have that I'm not supposed to have? And remember, it may not be the big takeaway of the movie. It can be subplots in the same way that even something subtle, like the girls playing with the wrestlers, the action figures in an aggressive way, was obviously showing showing gender non-conforming behavior. That's just a part of the philosophy that's given overall. Hope that helps. See you next time.